In the last episode, you learned about migrations. A migration class represents the blueprint for a table, or the blueprint for a change you're about to make to a table. When we run the PHP Artisan migrate command, Laravel looks for any migrations that have not yet been executed, and it triggers them. For each file, it runs the up method to build up your table structure. So now that we have a projects table, we need an Eloquent model to go along with it. Eloquent is Laravel's active record implementation. I think you'll like it. Just as we had a make command to build up a migration, there's also one to create an Eloquent model. So generally, a model will be the singular form of whatever your table is. So in our case, if we switch to SQL Pro, we have a table called projects. So if we want a model that represents a single record from that projects table, well, we might call it project. Let's make a model called project. Okay. You'll find this model within your app directory. Here it is. With this single class, we now have access to a huge amount of power. To demonstrate this, let's boot up PHP Artisan Tinker. You learned about this a few episodes ago. Think of this as the playground for your Laravel app. You can run basic PHP, or you can reference any number of your classes. So for example, if I were to say app project, well, let's fetch everything from the database, all records. Okay, so it looks like we get a collection of items, but there are no projects, right? The projects table is empty, so we get an empty collection. But we could do something like first, well, give me the first project you find. There isn't one. Let's change the order. Let's say reverse the order and then give me the first one. And of course, once again, we get null. So why don't we create a new project? We can do this in a couple ways. Let's do the simplest one first. I'll create a variable called project, and then I will instantiate a new project. Now, what fields do we need to provide? Well, you need to match what you specified within your migration. So right here, we have a title and a description. Okay, project title is my first project, and project description is, just some kind of lorem ipsum text. Okay, so if I run our project model now, it consists of a title and a description. I think we're all set to go. So let's persist it. I will call project save. And that's it. You've now inserted a new record into your database. And there it is. As simple as that. So now let's rerun some of those previous commands. I'm going to hit up a couple times. This will cycle through my previously run queries. Let's grab the first project, and we get an instance of project that contains that information, which means I can say, give me your first project and give me the title of it, or give me the description. Neat. Let's try it again. Remember that option all? Let's call that method. Okay, well now we get a collection of all projects in that table. At the moment, it looks like there's just one, but why don't we create another one? All right, let's do it again. New app project. The project title will be my second project. The project description is, once again, lorem ipsum. And finally, we can save it. Okay, now if I fetch all projects again, we get a collection of 2 items. Now, you'll learn quite a bit more about collections in future episodes, but for now, think of it as a glorified array. If you were to take an array, you were to make it object-oriented, and you were to add a number of useful methods and helpers and shortcuts on top of it, you may find that collections are one of your favorite pieces of the framework. Let's grab all projects and then get the first one. We'll access it as if it was an array. Okay, or let's grab the second one. There we go. So if I want the second title, there we go. Or, this is a bit above our pay grade at the moment, but let's grab all projects, let's map over them, and then return the title for each. Okay, now we have a collection of only the titles. So if that just blew your mind, it's okay. I just want to get you excited for all the possibilities there. We'll discuss that in the future. So file that one away. Anyways, if I switch back, let's think about it. We've learned about routing. You've learned about controllers. You've learned about views. And now you've learned about models. So if you've ever heard the acronym MVC, you've already learned the basics of it. MVC stands for Model View Controller. Here's your model. Here's a view, and here's a controller. Together, these represent the basic building blocks of how you will construct most of your Laravel applications. Or in other words, you set up a route. Well, when the user visits, how about /projects? Well, I want to load a projects controller. All right. Well, what method? Well, let's call an index method. All right, but that doesn't exist. All right, well, let's move on to the next step. Make a controller. That's the C in MVC, projects controller. All right, there's your controller. You have index, and that should load a view. Let's load a projects directory and a file called index. This is going to look within your resources directory, views directory. It's going to look for a projects folder and then index.blade.php. I'll do a full HTML file here, and we'll say projects. So let's take a look at this in the browser. PHP artisan serve, load this up, and then we'll visit projects. There we go. So we registered a route. That route responded to this URI by loading a controller. That controller returned a view, and that view described what sort of response we want to provide to the user. So now we just need to fill in that M portion of MVC, the model. It sounds like we want to fetch all projects, and we already learned how to do that. App, project, all. Fetch all projects and save it to a variable called projects. Now, real quick, you might be confused because you might be thinking, well, I called the model project, but what is this? If you're not familiar with this, it could be new, I'm not sure. Let's go over it very quickly. Laravel follows a convention called PSR4. It's a bit technical, and in fact, I don't really want you to even think about it at all. But nonetheless, that requires that we follow a specific namespacing structure. So notice that we're in the app directory, so all models will have a namespace of app. What about controllers? Well, you're in the app directory, within the HTTP directory, within the controllers directory, which means the namespace will be app HTTP controllers. If namespacing is a bit new to you, I often think of it in terms of maybe back when you were young and you would organize your music collection. You might have a folder for all of your favorite artists and bands and groups, but if you store everything within a single directory, you're going to have a lot of name clashing, right? If you maybe a song called I Need You, well, how many songs have been written called that? You're going to have a lot of collisions. So instead, you could organize things by separating all of these songs according to the artist or the band. So you would create special directories, one for AC/DC, one for CC Top, one for Justin Bieber, of course. Now you're much less likely to run into these collisions. That's kind of a 101 example there. And the same is true here. So that means whenever I want to use this project, I have to pull in not project, but the full namespaced path, which is app project. We can see that here. Now you still might be wondering, well, what about that / there? Well, think about it. If we did this, we're already within a namespace. So PHP interprets this as us saying, hey, I want app HTTP controllers app project. And that doesn't exist. So we begin with a /, and that tells PHP, hey, start at the root, start at the global namespace root, and then find my project class. Or what people often do is they pull it in, and this is what you will see me do most of the time. Import my project class, and now I can reference it like so. Okay, so to start, before we even pass anything to our view, I'm going to return projects. Now, as you're going to learn, Laravel has a lot of bells and whistles, and among those is the fact that it can interpret this return statement as our way of returning JSON. Take a look at this. I'm going to go back to Chrome, and I'm going to give it a refresh. Now, for you, it may look something like this, but nonetheless, notice that JSON was in fact returned. Again, this is a bit further along than we're ready for, but just know in the future, if you need to return different format types to satisfy an API or users accessing through the browser, you have a lot of flexibility there. Anyways, if you'd like to pull in the JSON formatter extension for Chrome, simply Google it. JSON formatter extension. You can install that, and that will give you a nice parsed output. And that's what I'm using here. So nonetheless, we can see that there are two projects, and that makes sense. We already learned that. So now, like we learned, I'm going to pass that to our view, like so. Or, as we learned, you can also use a compact function if you like that. I find developers are split down the middle on this, so it's up to you. Either way, the two are identical. So now that we've passed projects to this view, we can simply iterate through them. Let's say for each projects as project, now don't forget we're using Blade here. If this is foreign to you, make sure you go back and watch the Blade lesson. I'll place it within a list item. Why don't we simply grab the title of each project? All right, project, title. So notice each of the fields within your database table, once again right here, title, description, created at, updated at, each of those fields are available as basic properties on your Eloquent model. So if I switch back to Chrome, give it a refresh, there we go. In this lesson, you created an Eloquent model, you queried your database, you passed the resulting collection to your view, and then using Blade, you filtered through all of those projects and you echoed the title to the page. So depending upon your skill level, you might think, I understand all of this. This is great. Or you might be thinking, all right, this is starting to get a little complex. I'm having trouble keeping up. It's okay. If you're in that boat, I've been there too. We've all been there. Just take it one step at a time. But what I want you to think about is even if you're only barely able to keep up at this moment, you've already learned so much. You've learned about how to prepare routes. You've learned how to direct those routes to controllers. You then learned how to, within that controller, query your database table using a nice, clean syntax. There's no SQL within here. Instead, we're using Eloquent, which again is Laravel's active record implementation. Once you queried your database, you passed the resulting data to your view, and your view then accepts that data and renders it for the user. So believe it or not, but you're making really, really good progress, and you're learning the core fundamentals of constructing a Laravel app.